Hi, I'm your host, Anand J Sukhadia, and this is the Limitless One Podcast. Join me on this journey as I interview the most inspirational souls who are tapping into their limitless blueprint on a mental, physical, and spiritual level to thrive in uncertain times. If you feel you are so much more than just this body, just this life, and want to tap into your limitless potential, you're in the right place. Here we go, starseeds. We each have a moment of power that we can step into to make the decision to transform our lives. Well, sometimes that opportunity presents itself over and over again, while other times that moment is fleeting and never presents itself again. How then do we choose to take action? Welcome to the Limitless One Podcast. I am your host, Anand J Sukhadia. Our guest today stepped into a moment of uncertainty and came out with a transformational experience more powerful than anything he could have dreamed of. Barry Goldstein has composed and produced for television, film, major record labels, and top 10 recording artists. Barry Goldstein's musical experiences spans many styles and genres, from co-producing the Grammy Award-winning track 69 Freedom Special with Les Paul for Best Rock Instrumental in 2005, to providing ambient music for Shirley Maclaine. In addition, as an artist, Barry reached the Billboard Top 10 albums on the New Age charts with New York Times bestselling author Neil Donald Walsch. Barry's CD, Ignite the Heart, recently won the Coalition Visionary of Resources Award for Best World Fusion Album of 2015. I came across Barry's sacred music through my work in the Dr. Joe Dispenza meditation practices, as his music creates the vibrational setting for reaching altered states of consciousness. Barry Goldstein, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Anand. Great to be here with you. Excited to talk to you.
Absolutely. You know, I'm wowed because I got back from Egypt a couple of months ago, actually, by now. And since then, the synchronicities that have been happening in my life have been just unbelievable. So I started working on my mind movie, which is essentially a video like to tap into the feeling of my life and where I want to lead it to and what I want to create. And your music, I got exposed to it through Dr. Joe Dispenza, through a lot of the meditation. So your music, one of the titles, Four Pathways to Love, is on my mind movie. So the soundtrack of my life essentially is on that. And then also I interviewed somebody else just the same week that I met you at a concert back in March. So yeah, it's just the synchronicities are happening. If I'm thinking about something, it's automatically coming into my field of reference, which is such a blessing, because I know I come on the right path.
Right, absolutely. It's that connection. It doesn't take a lot of time for things to happen when we feel that connection and we're open to it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite the sign, right? And nowadays, I think that, our energies, our consciousness is rising so much that it's happening immediately a lot of times. Whereas before, I would think I'd have to go through the 3D realm to, put all the energy and movement and action and everything to take a little bit of time to get to where I want to go to. Now it's happening so fast. So I'm very grateful for this moment in my life, and also to have you on the podcast because, I absolutely love your music and what it stands for. And I just wanted to learn a little bit about how you got into developing this type of conscious music.
Well, yeah, it's been in the making for a long time, and it constantly is evolving. I don't think there are any experiences that we have that we are not able to utilize somewhere in our path. So I've gone through like many musical lifetimes in this one lifetime. And, initially, I wasn't doing this type of music per se. I was much more involved in pop and hip hop and club music. And, I developed my expertise in New York City as a music producer. And, it was seeded many years before that as a child, in terms of there was a piano in my house, and my mom at a very early age got me behind the piano And I remember her literally playing notes on the piano and singing on top of them to Harry Belafonte's Yellow Bird. And, just being fascinated, not just with the notes and her matching the notes with her singing them, which I now know to be resonance, when we have a frequency and it's amplifying another frequency. That's what resonance is. But I was also fascinated with the way that the notes hung in the air after she played, the way they would sustain. And there was something going on with the notes in between, the space in between the notes. And it was interesting that later became a unique part of my style and the music that I'm doing now. So that fascination with, with music, but also sound in general. That something was going on in me. It wasn't just happening to me, but music was happening in me, and it was amplified through what was going on in the space. So that, was my initial fascination. If you look behind you in that cherry sunburst, Gibson Les Paul, as my path started to unfold, my dad bought me a Gibson Les Paul, and that's a great story. When he bought it for me, we couldn't afford the guitar, so he took me aside and he actually made me promise to him that I was going to stick with music. And so as an excited 14-year-old kid, I made that promise. And at that time, I really didn't understand what it meant, what we had put in motion vibrationally with that promise. And I would look at that guitar, and as I was coming up as a producer, and there were, struggles to kind of make ends meet initially, I would look at that guitar and say, wow, that could be like 2 months worth of rent living in New York City. But I remember that promise that I made my dad, and I would always see the name Les Paul. And that became symbolic of my dad's investment in me, and I would look at that name and see it and connect to that name and talk about putting something out into the field. So my dad bought me that guitar when I was 14. 30 years later, almost exactly, I ended up working with Les Paul, the guy whose name was on the guitar, by a string of beautiful synchronicities and intention. And I believe that promise that was seeded as well. I ended up co-producing a Grammy Award-winning track with Les Paul. So you never know how things are going to manifest and ripple out from the rites of passage that we experience. And that promise was a rite of passage, that occurred between me and my father. So yeah, that's like a brief history of how all this was seeded. And we could talk more about how that kind of led to the type of music that I'm doing, but those were really the seeds that were created a long time ago.
Wow, what an incredible story. I just look at it as like, yeah, you planted the seed, but then you also had the North Star in your life the whole time, is that you wanted to honor your father and the promise that you made to him. So subconsciously, everything you were doing was leading you down a certain path that brought you to unfold all these other levels of, your life story. But did you always know that this is the direction you wanted to go into? Like, this is going to be my career? Or did you go into any other, say career lines or anything like that? Or did you go straight into music and you knew, okay, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life?
I think there was an inner knowing that I was going to do it. And, that's my same father who bought me that guitar was also brought up in the Depression, so he had his limited belief systems that were geared around music, and predominantly that music is a great hobby, but what are you going to do for a living? So in my brain, there was always had to be a B plan to fall back on. And I even went to school. I didn't go to school for music. I went to school for business, which has served me well, definitely, especially having that side and being in the music business was definitely a blessing to have. But initially, I was always looking for something to fall back on. So it wasn't until I was about 28 years old that I realized that my dad was not on the cover of Entrepreneur Today, and it was really time to take off the training wheels, and kind of ditch the B plan and make music my A and my B plan. And that's really, what I did, and did work around releasing those ancestral patterns that we limit ourselves with. But, in that time period up until 28, I was doing everything that I possibly could to manifest doing this full time, and at that time that was a goal. Like, wow, if I could just work doing music full time, that would be amazing. So, I was actually working as a corporate loss prevention manager. I worked for Barnard University as assistant director of loss prevention. I worked for Sam Ash Music. Like, I was working 2 or 3 jobs at a time. I was working from midnight to 8. I was getting off and waiting tables, whatever needed to be done. And then I started my recording studio at well. So there were times where I was literally getting like 4 hours sleep a night, getting off and working security, waiting tables, and then starting to work with clients in my own recording studio, which was out of my apartment in Astoria, Queens initially.
Wow.
So, whatever needed to be done until I became that full-time producer. And then that literally became a job, and I don't know if you've experienced that, or people listening have had that experience where you have this intention and then it manifests through, I call it through mush and push, right? Mush is move until something happens, and push is in pray until something happens. Right. So it's a combination of the two where we're working with our own signature vibrationally, whatever it is here we do, but we're also connecting to asking for guidance within that. But what happened was, what I had manifested wasn't what I thought, and then suddenly music became a job. It became a lot of timelines and deadlines as I became a professional record producer and was honing those skills. It was 100 hours to create a 4-minute song, and timelines and deadlines. And that's really where this whole path opened up for me. And where it started was that I got very stressed. I got burnt out. I had a lot of anxiety around it, and I was having challenges sleeping. And, a few years into that, I knew that I needed to reconnect with that 14-year-old kid who was sitting on the edge of his bed with a guitar and writing songs. What happened to that love and that joy? So I decided that I needed to switch things up. And I asked myself the question, what would happen if I moved out of directing music so stringently, those very detailed songs that were taking 100 hours to produce? What would happen if I just let music flow through me? And instead of composing, I was kind of like decomposing with the music. And I had done some research and found that our heart at a relaxed state beats between 60 to 70 beats per minute. And I knew that I wanted to move my heart to a more relaxed state. So I started taking these journeys and setting my metronome for 60 beats per minute. And I would just let the music come through me and not steer it, not compose it, not edit it in any way. And I realized I was moving into very meditative states doing that, and moving out of those stress induced states and that anxiety induced state, and moving into a more coherent state. I didn't know what coherence was at that time, but that's what it was, right? My heart was in training to that rhythm of 60 beats per minute. And I was actually moving into a parasympathetic state where my body was able to relax, detox. At the time I didn't know any of this. I was just experiencing it, and I started sharing those compositions because they were so helpful for me with friends of mine and getting great results. People were telling me they were using them for insomnia and going to the dentist's office and birthing children into the world and for parents with dementia. And that really, created this curiosity of why was this happening? Like outside of it being successful for myself, I really wanted to understand the science behind of what was going on. So that led to a lot more research and a lot more compositions in this genre of music, which, also led to me writing a book.
Wow. So you just changed your frequency and then this whole level of consciousness opened up for you. Did you consider yourself a meditative type guy, or were you into any kind of like spiritual, like thinking or research or anything before you started this? Or did it just started coming to you in a way that can't be expressed through words, but just through the music?
Yeah. I mean, right around that same time, I really, I had what I call a spiritual awakening. And at that time, I remember, I'm sure you're from the tri-state area. So you probably have been on the Metro North before in terms of coming from upstate New York.
Limited. I grew up in Staten Island. So Staten Island Ferry was my thing.
Okay. So yeah. So I was coming from hanging out at a friend's for the weekend in upstate New York and coming into Grand Central from there. And I was taking a nap. And when I woke up, literally I was looking at the, I think it was the Mid Hudson. And I remember that the sun was beaming off the Mid Hudson and it literally felt like it shot right through me. And I don't know, there was this knowing that I was part of everything and that everything was part of me. And I was raised to think that I was agnostic because my father thought that he was agnostic. And again, things that are passed down to us. And I realized in that moment that I definitely was not agnostic. And I felt it in every cell of my body. And that opened up this inquiry, for me, that led to very much so to me taking these musical journeys and also reading every book that I possibly could get my hands on that was geared towards spirituality. So I wasn't really brought up, in a spiritual context or religious context, but I always felt a calling and a connection to something beyond myself. And even from that very young age, I didn't put a name to it, but I would always feel it when I was playing music. I felt something going on in terms of being connected to something else. And when I started to take those hour-long journeys and moving to those meditative states, I knew that there was something else going on, that I wasn't just composing, but I was also being composed at the same time. And as I said, that really opened up, that experience opened up me questioning things and wanting to tap back into it. Because when we have an experience, and I'm sure this has happened to you, when you're in a meditative state and you have this experience and you feel connected and something's going on here where you like, as you said, you feel like you're raising your vibration to some level. You're not just experiencing it, but you're already wanting that to occur again. How do I repeat that event? And that really becomes part of the search, and the excitement of it is you want to be able to come back to it. And so whenever I tap back into that energy of composing music, especially after the awakening, I felt that connection. And I knew that that was a way for me to dive deeper into the connection was through the creative process. And that has always been my way that I meditate, is through the creative process. Because when I started taking those journeys, even that very first one, I didn't have a lot of expectation going on. So it just came through me. And music has the ability to create autobiographical moments for us. And that was an autobiographical moment in my life that I was instantly able to reconnect at any time to that field. And that has been my creative process ever since then.
Beautiful. And yeah, it's like that feeling of being truly alive. Everybody, there's a different entryways, right? So for you, you learned that music was your entryway from a very young age, and you always wanted to search to tap back into it. And sometimes when it was a little bit off, you kind of recentered, found different technologies or ways in which you can do it. In your case, changing the tuning of 60 beats per minute. Some people go through art or through dance or through meditation or sports. And for me, I was kind of like always searching that what is my entryway? But like yourself, I always knew that there was something more to this world than just this reality. And God bless our parents, they did the best they could, and they grew up in a time which was very different than the ability for us to then choose what we wanted to do. Back then, they just had to do whatever they needed to do, and they passed on their traits, whatever fears or epigenetics that they took on from their parents. And there's been a lot of healing for me just going through and understanding and accepting my parents. They did the best they can. I love them so much for trying hard as they did. But then it's up to me to change the mindset, right? So like, a lot of times my mom was very much in fear. Oh, you shouldn't do this because it's not safe or whatever. So then part of you adapt to that, right? But then there's that other moment or that feeling where you feel like, okay, I need to step out of this, because I know that I'm a limitless being, but I just feel like I'm kind of being like stuck in a bubble here. So for you, I know you kind of went through that as well a little bit. What does living a limitless life mean to you after you came to that realization that it's possible?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the limitless part of what I do is geared towards creation. So for me, living a limitless life means constantly creating. And when we're in that state of creation, we're connecting to creator, right? So look around you and take a walk in nature and look at a flower, right? And look at the colors and listen to the ocean, and the music of nature and the birds, right? When you think about that unlimitless mind that created all of that, right? That is, to me, the definition of limitlessness, right? Is that creative energy. And when you can create something from nothing, and you can do that on a daily basis, you're constantly creating to not having limits, because you're constantly birthing something into the world. And it's not, I think there's a misconception that creativity is predominantly for artists, for musicians, for that type of creation. And people say, well, I'm not creative, or I don't have a lot of creativity. Most of the time, that's not true. And studies have shown that when they tested and followed children from the age of 5 years old all the way to adulthood, they found that 5 years old, that 5% of them were measured to be creative geniuses. As they learned more and went through the educational process, at 10 years old, it was half that. At 15 years old, it was like 30%, and adulthood, it was 2%. So we're born, most of us have this creative energy, and it's not just necessarily from music and arts. It could be creative thinking or thinking out of the box, or even creating a moment in somebody else's life. If you have that awareness that you're constantly creating, then everything becomes an opportunity to create. Smiling for a waitress who's having a bad day, or being there and listening to a friend and empathizing with them. That's all creating. And that's literally creating moments that could shift other people's lives. So for me, that unlimitlessness comes with the awareness that we're constantly creating, we're constantly birthing something from nothing. And by tapping into the energy and walking with the divine or walking with God in our day, opens up that space for unlimitedness, right, to occur every single day. And that's where the fun begins. Like you said, those synchronicities occur much more frequently when you're in the state of creation, because that's the vibration of synchronicities. You're constantly creating. So that's how personally I tap into that unlimitedness on a daily basis. Is just create something every day.
That's so beautiful the way that you put it. And it's not just limited to certain, fields of study or anything like that. And what's beautiful is that, you can create, because we have this divine spark, right? And we walk with it every day. And anything that begins in the mind and then manifests into reality, that's considered a miracle to me, but we don't give ourselves the credit for it. My story in the past, because maybe a couple of bad experiences in music or in mathematics, I always said, oh, I'm not good at math, I'm not good at music. And I just repeated that in my head. So I was just kind of like pushed it away as much as possible. I remember I was kind of forced to take piano. I wasn't really crazy about it, but the teacher that I had, she was always on me about like, oh, you don't practice, you're never going to be good. And then we were at a recital one time and I was supposed to play one of these songs, which is a little bit more advanced for someone who's like a year into it. And I was so nervous. I just played Mary Had a Little Lamb, and she reamed me out afterwards. She said, "You embarrassed me. I can't believe you played that song." So it was just like, I was traumatized at that moment. But in reality, is like, we maybe people in their childhood, they have some kind of negative experience with creativity, and it shuts them off. So I think it's so important for us to be able to have so many outlets to do the creative work that we do. Same thing with mathematics. Like, it's like I was never good at it. I thought I wasn't. And now music, art, all these things, dance is coming into my life, and I'm looking to embrace it, because when I start studying these things, it opens my perspective, opens my mind to other things. And that part of being limitless is like, why look at any particular field of study or art and judge it saying, oh, I'm not good at this, rather than saying, this is all part of, the divine construct, and to embrace it rather than push it away.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And, many of the great inventors and minds in our world and in our lifetimes have utilized music as a gateway to higher states of consciousness. And even Einstein, who in his wife and his children's memoirs, they talked about him playing piano and violin. He was a musician as well. I don't know if you know that, but he was a musician. And when he would get blocks, he would either pick up the violin or the piano, and they would hear him from the other room say, I got it. Right. So moving out of the thinking mind and from into a different part of your mind can open up and move you through through blocks, and create breakthroughs and transformation, and enhance and amplify creativity as well. And when we start allowing music to become the bridge of science and spirituality, that's when we really can amplify whatever our mission is in terms of what we feel that we're here to do. And so for me, that became a big threshold too. It's like, okay, yes, I understand that there's this connection, and I'm able to access it through music, but I also was blessed to have received a song in a dream state. It was a song called Through the Eyes of God. And in this dream, I was literally shown the aspects of oneness from a point of view of being a blade of grass, a single blade of grass, and experiencing everything else. So at the same time that I was this blade of grass, I was the mist within the rain. I was the sands upon the shore. And when I woke up, I had this song that was in my head that was part of the dream. I had the melody, which I made sure that I actually, at the time, it's not, recorders were not as accessible as they are now. So I remember calling myself up and leaving a message on my answering machine with the melody of the song and writing down all the lyrics that came through. And there were a lot of verses that came through for the song. And it felt like I had heard that song before. And so I realized in that moment that that song was a gift that was given to me, not just as a song, but so I can understand what oneness was really about, and that there's nothing that we do that doesn't affect something else. You know, that blade of grass is a blade of grass, but it's affected by the wind, it's affected by the rain, and the sun is, you know, how it's nurtured, and it affects everything else at the same time. And when I woke up with that knowing, there was another part of it too that's like, wow, this came into a dream. Creator and creativity came into this dream and gifted me. What would happen if, instead of waiting for that to happen to me again, if I began to invite that creator into my process? So not just knowing there was a connection, but inviting it in. What would happen if I invited God in to create with me in every creation? And that became part of the creative process. And what happened is, it's very rare that I've experienced creative blocks since then. Because if I have that state of connection and I'm creating to the unlimited, I know that if I'm experiencing a creative block, it's just because I've closed off that connection in some way. And so it's a constant reminder to, if I'm having a creative block, to just reconnect in some other way. And you will never experience that creative block because you're collaborating with an unlimited source.
Now, you talk a lot about coherence, and I know you wrote a book about the mind and the heart and how you are you talking about that in your creativity? So like if there is any kind of blocks, many people find it's a lot of times we're just thinking through the mind rather than the full spectrum of, you know, bridging those two elements, those two energy centers. Can you talk a little bit about how why it's so important for the two to merge themselves in order to open up to the creative, limitless, you know, the abilities that we have?
Yeah, and that's like a multi-part question, really, too, because you know, when most people get into creative blocks because they move into a space of editing before their flow state's complete, right? So if I move into a flow state and I'm bringing in music, what I like to do is create as many parts as I possibly can to it. So I'll go through an initial pass where I'm composing something, and then I create multi-layers of things where I'm, you know, creating the arrangement around that. But I'm not editing it. I'm just letting as many parts that want to come through. And I can move into a session after where I'm editing it, but I just let it all flow through first. And so for people who are listening who have creative blocks, if you're starting your editing process before that flow state is complete, you stop that divine energy for coming in prematurely. So you can always edit, and the thinking mind that wants to go back and say, oh, I made a mistake, or that's not exactly the way I want it, you know, you can appease the mind by saying, okay, it's all good. We're going to come back and have a separate session for editing afterwards, whatever it is, you know, whether you're creating a business plan or you're creating a playlist for date night, whatever it is, you know, allow it to move into a full flow state. And you usually can tell when, you know, that's done, the energy kind of dissipates and the ideas kind of, you know, reach a funnel point where they're coming less regularly. So you know that flow state is complete. But in terms of targeting that, and then now we're talking into really where science and spirituality kind of bridge. There are things we can do with our physical body as well. So starting off, like as we just started off discussing, targeting my heart at 60 beats per minute, what I later known to be entrainment. So entrainment is when an internal rhythm can synchronize to an external rhythm of some kind. So in this case, our internal rhythm is our heartbeat, and the external rhythm is the metronome or the music. So we know through studies that the Institute of Heart Math has done that when we move to higher states or higher emotions, such as gratitude, kindness, compassion, that our heart beats in smoother and more orderly rhythms. And they define that as coherence. So if you look at that as our heart being the conductor of the rhythm in our body, what's going on in the rest of our physical body. So if you view our body as an orchestra, and each of the different systems is a part of the orchestra, like our digestive system, our endocrine system, our lymphatic system. Think about what it would sound like if each one of those played music, whatever it wanted, whatever tempo in whatever key, and they all played simultaneously. Right? So what you would hear would be very dissonant or disharmonious. But what would happen if there was a set tempo and a set key? And so that's really what the heart is doing, is setting the tempo. And when we move into those smooth and orderly rhythms, it's sending messages out to the rest of our body. And when they synchronize, we can achieve more optimal health or well-being because they are in that state of synchrony and harmony. And there's a designated rhythm that's happening in there. So music is a bridge between that, and it allows our hearts to entrain to that set rhythm. So when we're synchronizing to that 60 beats per minute and our heart is producing those smooth, orderly rhythms, it's not just an emotional, a mental, or spiritual thing. Our physical body, right, is experiencing more optimal heart rate variability, which is a prime marker for heart health and overall health. When we increase our heart rate variability, we increase our ability to deal with stresses, our resiliency, and our ability to come back into, right, a more conducive state for healing. So music can actually be the bridge into that state where we're moving into what's called the parasympathetic state. And that's the rest and digest state. That's the place where we're able to detox. We're able to boost our immune system. And it can all happen in a very short period of time with the right music and what I call, the right musical recipe. And the research is showing that when our heart is moving into those coherent states, that there's a communication that's going on with the brain. And when we're moving into heart coherence, our brain starts to produce more alpha brain waves, which is conducive to that creative state, or conducive to moving into a calmer state of inner peace where we get these amazing ideas and we're able to rest the brain from thinking and revitalize ourselves. So music can really, it's what I call acousticeuticals. So we have pharmaceuticals, we have nutraceuticals, right? And acousticeuticals can really, really put us into that state where music is medicine.
Yeah, I'm all about the acousticeuticals. It's the ancient cultures. They all knew this. And if you look at the Native American with the drumming, shamanic drumming, at very similar beats as the heart. So it's kind of getting us into coherence with that music, and it opens up, ecstatic states. And then when you couple dance and music and chanting, the ancient Indians, or the Vedics, they sing mantras. So like these all have harmonies that resonate through the body into each one of our cells to allow us to get into that heart brain state. And then when your heart and your mind are connected through the vagus nerve, and you're able to kind of get it into that coherent state, then all types of possibilities open up. We go into that love frequency. And I know, like, a lot of people talk about music with 432 hertz, gets us into a certain feeling versus, what a lot of the music right now is at 440, I believe. So do you find that as well, as like when certain, like, you're measuring certain hertz of the music that you're playing, or you set it instruments to those frequencies?
Yeah, I mean, I've played around with a lot of different tunings
Mhm.
just because that inspires me to create. So I think it's a bit oversimplified when we start talking about just like universal tunings that are better or worse than this, because ultimately it's not just the tuning, and that's part of the recipe as well. Is that it's also about the composition. It's also about the harmonics that are used in it. It's also about intention and emotion that are put into the music. So, we've listened to a lot of music. I'm sure that you've heard most of your life at 440, that you've had major and many healing experiences with compositions within that music. So to negate it and say that's not healing, to me, is not accurate. And the same thing with, there being a specific frequency for this, we're really talking about whole tunings. And that's what people don't realize, is that when we're talking about tuning to 432, most people aren't just talking about a single note of tuning a 432. They're talking about the attunement of tuning all of all of the keys into the a 432 tuning. Okay, so within that, there can be so many different combinations of sound, and some can be dissonant and some can be harmonious. I'm sure if I played you 100 compositions in 432, that you are going to like 50 of them, and you may not like 50 of them. So does that say that, oh, well, I don't like 432? Or does it say I don't like those compositions per se? So I think for me, ultimately, it's not just about the frequency, it's about each one of us becoming our own sound healer and understanding what is healing to us. Because I can say, hey, Anand, I just created this amazing piece of music at 432, and you should listen to this for this, that, and that, because that was successful for me. So if you think of it more as nourishment, just like we nourish ourselves with food, it would be just like I'm saying, Anand, you have to eat broccoli because the studies are showing that broccoli can help us actually battle cancer. But if you're allergic to broccoli and it's creating inflammation in your body, it's not going to be helpful for you. So it's the same thing. It's more about how can we see if a piece of music resonates with us? And it's more about understanding that when you experience a piece of music that's healing for you, it puts you into an expansive state. So what is being expansive? So for me, it's like standing on top of a mountain and feeling like unlimited energy coming in to my heart. And I can feel that expansiveness when I hear that piece of music, or I might get God bumps or chills. But when I hear a piece of music that doesn't resonate with me, I feel more contracted, like I'm kind of covering up, and it feels dissonant to me. And it doesn't feel great, even if it's could be a beautiful piece of music, but for me, it feels contracted. So if you can bring that into music when you're listening and start understanding that music's just not something that happens to you, but it's something that happens in you, then you can make an assessment based on how it feels for you physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually when you hear that piece of music. It's not just geared towards one thing or one frequency, but a combination of how you feel when you listen to it. So it's a long-winded answer to your question. So I do believe in different tunings, and I do believe that they have beneficial aspects to them. But ultimately, I don't create a piece of music because of that. I create a piece of music because it inspires me as the composer, and it's healing to me as a composer, and it's expanding to me as a composer. So there's frequency that goes in it. There's intention. I want to make sure that my intention is aligned with the piece of music when I'm walking into the room. If I'm creating a loving piece of music and that's my intention, and I had a bad day and I was angry about something, I don't want to come into that room and compose. I want to move into the state where I'm connected, and the intention is pure with what I'm going through emotionally in my day. So, intention and emotion are aligned, and also the composition. And that's based on, 30 years or 40 years of composing music. We're connecting to an unlimited field, but we also develop our own expertise and master something in our lifetimes. And we're applying our soul signature to our creations at that same time. So I'm collaborating with the divine, but I'm also bringing in my unique vibration and my own skills and mastery into that composition. So you can see it's not just always a simple process, but we want to simplify things, and that's the nature of us as humans. We want to find a panacea for this and a panacea for that, and use this for that, or this for that, or this for this. But ultimately, you have to be the keeper of your own gate to see what resonates with you and what doesn't.
Absolutely. That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Now, your music has such a unique signature. When I listen to your music, I feel the frequencies, the intention behind it, the love behind it. Is there a type of formula that you use? So say like when you're composing a new music, do you just like, okay, don't even think about, okay, which instruments I'm going to use? Or do you have like a layering process where, okay, I'll start with the piano, then go to the guitar, or it's totally up, up to what the feeling and the wave of the way that you're, at that day in particular?
Yeah, I mean, I compare similarly to, an artist, right? An artist will have a palette of colors in front of them, and sometimes they buy new colors, right? Or they blend colors, right? And there's something in that inspires them when they blend it, or inspires them when they buy a new palette of colors. And for me, it's the same thing with sound. So I like sculpting sound. I'll play with a sound and start with an initial sound and sculpt it so it has more decay on it, or the release is longer on it and it holds longer, or it has a beautiful low tone in it that I hear and say, oh, that would be beautiful to just have a grounding piece of music around that. So I start from really being inspired by a sound usually, and then I just ask it, what do you want to become? And go from there, and in the process of, as an artist is painting, and then they might blend a color and suddenly they're affected emotionally by that, and they say, oh, I know what this is kind of becoming now, right? It's the same thing with sound. So as I'm going along and I'm blending sounds and I'm kind of mixing them and creating this sound canvas, there are certain things that are affecting me. Like I might feel my heart opening up in that specific chord or that specific mode that I'm playing. And so as I start to move into the process of that unfolding, where do I want to open that heart space more and really amplify that? Do I want to bring a cello in there or a violin to really tug at the heartstrings a little bit more? And as the painting, unfolds more, I start to envision the listener, and how would the listener be feeling by receiving this music? And so it's already gearing towards how the manifested would be heard in terms of the process. And that, brings in another whole thing as well. So, there are different formulas that occur, but it's never like, okay, I'm going to go through A. Okay, done. I went through A. Now I got to go to B, or C. There are certain ingredients in the recipe that are like uniformed, per se, that happen in a composition, but they might be different emotions in each one, or it might be different, key or different harmonics or whatever it is. But it's like painting or cooking, where you have a recipe. But, for me, it's always the secret ingredient. It is always love, and it's just like, I compare it to grandma's meatballs, or a dish that was cooked for you in your tradition, where, you might have that recipe and it was written down for you to pass through generations. And it tastes kind of like grandma's, right? But there's still something missing, because grandma changed it up a little bit every time. Those were the basics. But she was always seeing her family eating that recipe and the love that was going on at the dinner table, hopefully, and all the things that would occur. So there's your basic recipe, but then, hey, this time she said, I want to try a little something different. Let me throw a little more spice into it this time. So I hope that was helpful for you in terms of the analogy.
Yeah. Absolutely. So like just from the end user, I feel the love that you pour into the music. And I just know I've done a lot of Dr. Joe Dispenza events and do the meditations every single day. So I'm listening to your music daily, and there's hundreds of thousands of people probably doing these meditations all over the world that are tapping into very high consciousness states in their mind. And I've even seen some people reach, gamma, and, obviously they pass delta and into gamma, and they're like reaching enlightenment. So how does that make you feel, like when your music is, a conduit for them to get to these places?
Yeah, to me, that is the ultimate gift and the ultimate reason to, to continue to do what I do. And for instance, in like composing a walking meditation, music for a walking meditation, or a piece of music within a walking meditation, I'm always envisioning the people walking already. I see them walking, and I've been at events and I've walked in events as well at, advanced retreats that Dr. Joe does. And I've seen people reach those states. So I take those mental snapshots of what that looks like. And I've seen video of it, and I incorporate that into, into the compositions. And I remember, actually last year I went to the Cancun retreat.
In December?
No, I went in June.
Oh, okay. I was at the December
I went in June. Yeah, and it was June of 2022. And I had a profound experience because as I was walking in the walking meditation to my own music, right, and I was watching people have these amazing experiences and breakthroughs, I got the message that every note matters. And it was really profound. I all of a sudden the floodgates open up. I began to cry in a state of gratitude, because when I'm alone here in the studio, and you're kind of going through the process, I'm feeling that energy, but that message of every note matters, even if I'm alone in my room, that it's important, that never think that it's just a passing note or a passing phrase, that it's all important in the recipe. So yeah, that is the ultimate state for me in those collaborations where I get to collaborate with Dr. Joe in terms of, in terms of music being a vehicle to assist, magnify mission. And Dr. Joe really understands that. He understands the importance of marrying the right music with his message, how that amplifies people's experiences. So that's why it's been such a beautiful relationship that we've had over the last 10 years, is because Dr. Joe does exactly what you and I had talked about. He knows when a piece of music makes him feel expansive and when it doesn't. And that's his criteria. He just has a knowing. This is the right piece of music for it or not, and, sometimes we land on it and sometimes we don't. It's all good.
Yeah, absolutely. The most important moment in the universe is the present moment. So when you were in these walks or listening to your music in a sitting down meditation, we're so deeply in the moment. So yeah, like you're saying, like every note hits a different frequency in the body or in the brain. And it's such a magical experience to kind of be in that conscious state, but then also know you're like floating on this beautiful musical wave. It's really, really incredible.
Yeah, and I went from being the composer to the one being composed.
Mhm.
It was like hearing the piece of music for the first time and being able to receive it outside of being the creator from it. So it was a really, really beautiful experience to have that. People ask me all the time, like, are you able to listen to your own music? And the answer is yes, absolutely. And many times when I listen to it after it's done, like months after or years after, it's like, wow, that's really cool. I don't remember composing that part necessarily, or I don't have a connection to it where I get burnt out, on listening to the music because it's my own. So it's actually a blessing to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to take a step back and hear your story, because I know you were producing for other people and you're very successful at it. And then at some moment in your life, you told us a story at the concert I went to, of how you decided, I want to start composing my own music now.
Yeah, well, like many other people, like you've heard as well, when we have a belief system and we bring it through our lives, many times we listen to it and it can create a contraction in our life or a block where creativity isn't occurring. So at a fairly young age, I was told by friends and people I grew up with, it's like, wow, dude, you write great music, but maybe you should just produce it and not perform it, or don't sing it. So I took that with me till I think I was about 44 years old. And I told this story at the concert that you went to. I walked into a conference and Wayne Dyer was speaking. And Wayne had this quote that he said that really, it felt like it was directed at me, a shot right through me. I feel like the rest of the audience had disappeared. And I was talking, Wayne was talking to me. And it was, don't die with your music still in you. And in that moment, I knew that I was holding back based on those limited beliefs. But part of why I started doing music was I loved singing, I loved writing songs, I loved performing. So I decided in that moment that I was going to write a full album of singer-songwriter songs. And I had a few of them that I started writing throughout the years. And I decided that in that moment that there was going to be no other choice but moving to completion, whether one person listened to it or a million people listened to it. And it took me about a year, I believe, to complete the record. And it was dedicated to that moment where I decided that there was no other outcome but completion. So I called the song The Moment. And the song The Moment is about that moment always being there with us. But we choose to step into it is when it actually manifests. I was just waiting for the moment to arrive. I was searching for a sacred sign, but it was right here all the time. And the cover of it is me at a bus stop. I'm waiting for this bus to come. But in reality, the bus has come many, many times in our lives, has passed us by. But when do we get on that bus, right? And decide that we're going to step into it is when it actually happens. And literally, a few months after the album was completed and it was out, I received a phone call from someone who was booking events for me. And she said, would you like to open up for Wayne Dyer in the Budweiser Center in Denver, Colorado? And so I got to open up for Wayne, and he came out and he rubbed the top of my head. And he actually quoted Through the Eyes of God, which is the song I told you about. He quoted it in his talk in Denver as well. So for me, it's all about inspiration, creating inspiration. He inspired me to create this album. And then I got to inspire 5,000 people who were there, and then got to inspire him back, where he included some of the teachings that were in my songs as part of his gift to the audience in that night. So that's really how it happened for me, and how I realized that, maybe my voice isn't perfect, in terms of what I'm hearing or what people heard many years ago when they said that, in that moment where I decided to receive their bad advice and just produce music as opposed to being the artist for it. And so after that, I just said, hey, I'm going to share this as just another part of who I am as a composer, is being that artist and voicing it. And there's so many different ways we can voice in music. We can be the artist, we could be the composer, we can be the producer, just like anything else. You could be behind the scenes in your business, or you can be the face of your business or the front part of your business. So it's all about honoring the different sides of what music means to me. And that was a crucial point for me as well. In terms of what I experienced over the last 40 years of being in music, there's a lots of different areas for it. But the common thread that weaves through it is that it's all spiritual. It's all connected. And that was something that I had to really address over the span of my career, which was a challenge for me, was that mind that wants to label something either spiritual or non-spiritual. And when I kind of hit that crux where it was like, okay, well, I have this type of music and I have this type of music, I realized that I had to tear down the wall, and that it wasn't helping me by serving two masters. And that was an awareness that I had to bring in, that all of it's spiritual. Everything I've learned over 40 years of working in different genres could be incorporated into a melting pot, or spiritual gumbo, I call it, right? Where you can stir around everything. And that's what, like, you hear in a walking meditation, or if you hear some of the breathing pieces that I've done for Dr. Joe as well, they're kind of eclectic. You can hear Native American chanting, you can hear Gregorian chanting, you can hear hip hop beats and, electronica, but beautiful ethereal pads and string arrangements all in one piece of music. And that's what happens when you tear down walls and you just create and say, hey, this is good. Everything I learned now is part of my recipe. Imagine how you expand your field of what you could create. So yeah, that goes from voicing it in just many different ways, and don't feel limited to one flavor in what you do.
Yeah, we're only limited by our perception in life. And what's so beautiful that this message has been repeating for me so much lately is you can't separate God from anything, from the worst things that are happening in the world to the most enlightened states of being. It's all part of the same container. And we're just seeing the inverse of if the more light you see, the more darkness you're going to see, but it's all part of it all. And when you merge the two, that's when you realize that, okay, that non-duality, that non-judgment of any of it that's part of the next step of ascension. So once you finished, once you made that decision to step into this moment, this transformational moment in your life, how did your life change after that?
Well, yeah, everything becomes part of the moment, when you bring the awareness into that every day is a possibility for something new and something creative. And that for me has always been my driving force. And the excitement is the ability to create something from nothing on this planet and in the universe. Is something that I created today wasn't there yesterday. And when you bring that into your days, it brings in excitement, and it brings in new excitement as well. And if you allow it to, it can redefine you every day. And so, yeah, I schedule my day. I set intentions. I'm a very driven person, but I allow time in my day to connect to the not knowing parts, and connecting to allowing whatever is creating with me to bring in new opportunities for collaboration and creation. And that's really what happens when you're tuned into that moment. You're constantly diversifying and reinventing, and it comes back in to believe it or not, to Les Paul. So Les Paul was one of the greatest inventors of all time. And most of the music that you experience today is because of Les Paul. So he didn't just invent the solid body electric guitar. He invented multi-track recording, which gives us the ability to overdub and create different tracks. He created digital reverb and aspects of digital delay, and a lot of the things that we are using in modern music. And when they asked Les, so I was part of that album, when they asked him why he created the electric guitar, his answer was, well, it wasn't there and we needed it. Which was so profound for me because, Les, as a younger Les, he was told as he was performing, hey, Les, we can hear your harmonica, but we can't hear the guitar. And, they were throwing like beers at him. And, there was he was in this, bar with had like chicken wire in front of it, because if they didn't like performers, and so Les went home and he started to create this electric guitar. And originally he was laughed at by Gibson initially when he brought in his first prototype. They said, kid, come back. And he came back 10 years later with the Les Paul that was, millions and millions of people are playing Les Paul because he knew there was a void. It wasn't there and we needed it. And I see that so much now, and it becomes part of the reinvention process of myself every day, because we're in like this amazing space now. Like 10 or 20 years ago, people would laugh at me, when I told them that I was healing with sound, or sound healing, right? Or the ability to use music as medicine. And now it's coming into mainstream, and we're seeing apps like Calm, right? And we're seeing it in 3D in apps like Trip, right? And I've been hired to work with neurofeedback companies and creating tones that were more musical. So I'm getting approached every day and being asked to utilize music in much different ways. And it's coming full circle, because it's coming back into pop music, where people are saying, hey, can you put this binaural beat into this pop song for me? Or what would happen if we implemented the Schumann resonance into this song? So people are becoming way curious. And so my initial goal was to bring this into mainstream music. And that's really why I ventured into this, is now coming around full circle. So where I started as a pop musician, and then where I took another, path to this type of music. Again, it's not two masters anymore. It's coming back around, and the universe is saying, wow, how could we get this into more mainstream areas? How can we get this into film? How can we get this into TV? How can we get this into help people in more ways? So that's what happens when you embrace the moment. You reinvent yourself every day.
Yeah, imagine if Les succumbed to the criticism and just stopped, just short of, hitting the jackpot of the creativity that you could have created and shared with the world, right? I think each of us, everybody listening to this, we're going to be tested at some moment, but it's our higher selves putting this roadblock in front of us because it wants to see us thrive beyond our wildest dreams. And I think once we start making that decision to overcome that and listen to the voice inside here rather than the outside voices, that's when you're truly sharing your song with the world rather than just playing it safe, right? And it's so beautiful that you had that experience and that we all go through these things and that we're able to overcome. It's really incredible. And I think that's the juice in life is like, if we created this video game of our life, why would we want it to be super simple? Right? Like we would want to have the experience of the highs and the lows and the loss and the tragedy and the love and the heartbreak and all of it all together. And I learned that from Robert Edward Grant, who talks about this. And it's just really magical when we look at life as a video game and every single day, like you said, looking at it as a blank canvas. What can I create today? And how can I share my song with the world?
Yeah, well said. And I mean, I think also, but sometimes it can be simple as well, and I think trading out, sometimes simple can be really powerful as well. So yeah, we can have complex games, that stretch our mind because they're multi-sensory and they're opening up different gateways and it's really cool. We're going through different passages. And sometimes also you can have something very simple. Go back to playing Pong, like one of the original video games. And I actually know the inventor, Nolan Bushnell, who created that. And what would happen when you played Pong, right? You'd go into this trance state of just this ball being volleyed back and forth. And how powerful that was when it was first created to inspire people to create video games in general, and to evolve into what we see as more complex now as well. So I think if we can let go of something being simple or complex and just allow ourselves to have the experience and not try to over analyze, oh, well, this is simple, how could it be powerful? Or this is complex, how could it not be powerful? And many experiences that I've had that have been powerful have just been based upon closing my eyes and going inward to my own heart and allowing myself to breathe, in and out of my heart and feel my own vibration and connection. Like what could be more simple than that, but also probably one of the most powerful and complex technologies, right, is connecting to the heart space, so it's still there, right? But we still have challenges connecting with our heart, even in the simplest ways, because of the many armors and forms of protection that we've created in our lives around that as well. So, there's so many great technologies that can take us to these amazing experiences. But I think it's important to not lose sight of some of the more ancient teachings as well that are based on the technology that we have been given to by God, and even in the Native American customs and the indigenous customs, we hear that saying, the longest journey you'll ever take is from your mind to your heart. Think about that technology and how that could change your life and just bringing that awareness in.
Yeah, the simplicity, but it's not the easiest journey, right?
That's right, and it's not
getting
easy.
Back to the basics, yeah.
Right, being easy and simple are two different things, right? I mean, like read a book like The Four Agreements, like by Don Miguel Ruiz, right? That has hit such a common chord, right? And that book was like pretty much was out there 25 years, I think, before it made it, right? And for some reason, there was a tipping point where it was, it was discovered, I think, by Oprah Winfrey, who then, all of a sudden, this book that was basically underneath the consciousness for so long became part of the consciousness. But yeah, it's 4 agreements that are a way to live our lives, but are so challenging, right?
Absolutely.
To be non-judgmental, right, is one of them. Think about that. How many times in a day we go into judgment, either for ourselves or others,
Yeah, absolutely. I read 4 agreements multiple times a year. I have it on my nightstand and I just always revert back to it. Anytime I have any questions or am feeling out of my heart, I just open up to it and say, okay, yeah, you violated one of these laws, these agreements. And
Yeah, there you go.
that's why there's struggle. When you just be in your heart, you don't judge, you don't make assumptions. It's always asking about, all right, start with curiosity rather than making assumptions. There's so
Right.
many nuggets of beautiful wisdom in there. But yeah, it's the more complex skins can get. Yeah, it's beautiful to learn to build all this knowledge base in our heads. And then when we get to this place, even if we do get to a place where we understand everything, which will never happen, you realize it's been simple all along. And then you deconstruct all the layers of the onion that you created in this identity that we think who we are. And we realize, oh, we're not this little meat suit. We're so much more. We're infinite consciousness. We're infinite potential. We are the extension of God. So it's a beautiful journey. And to go through this and to talk about music and how it relates to getting into higher states it's really beautiful, because I have pushed it away for so long in my life. I always loved listening to music and it moved me deeply, but I never felt I had the potential or the power to do it. So you've inspired me to start playing some music now. I have a guitar that I'll pick up and I'll start playing some chords and see how it feels.
Awesome. Good. I want to hear it.
Absolutely. So tell me about some of the projects you're working on right now.
Yeah, so we just completed a meditation with Dr. Joe that will be out soon. I don't know when this is airing, so I'm not going to tell you what it is now, but there are a few meditations in the making. I'm doing a project with Anita Morjani that is a beautiful healing meditation. I'm launching courses that gear towards how we can navigate our energy, utilizing music, how you can become the DJ of your own life, the power of heart and brain coherence, the science behind chanting, and how that connects us to deeper communion and communication with the divine. And, I'm finding more and more that by just putting more awareness into how we could utilize music in our days and how we are the programmers of our life, that creating music programs is more necessary now than ever. And so I'm reaching out into corporate areas as well. This year, I'm doing collaborations with Barbara Annis, who is geared towards gender differences, and she's an expert on that. With my wife, Dr. Denise Warden, we're bringing that into corporate America this year as well, as music as medicine. I am composing more for film and documentaries this year. I'm in the midst of doing a documentary right now that's out there. So yeah, people are out there and they're doing conscious films, and they're looking to bring in, vibrational music and music with intention. You're welcome to reach out to me and we can see if it's a match. I'm going back into doing retreats this year. I was just asked to do a retreat in Israel that's geared towards my teachings as well. So lots of fun stuff.
Yeah, what a beautiful time to be alive. There's so many amazing technologies and experiences that we can have, and the fact that you're constantly putting so much beauty into the world, it's really incredible. How can we learn more about you if we wanted to learn about your courses or anything else, anything that you have going on?
Yeah, the best way to reach me is barrygoldsteinmusic.com, and also The Sound of Transformation is really where my teachings are, where they live in my courses. And a lot of the courses cover some of the things that we talked about, where science and spirituality meet, and the latest research of how chanting's being used to create limbic deactivation, how the kirtan kriya is being used to improve memory, how heart coherence is being utilized to improve overall health. So it's really incorporating research and also utilizing experience and a lot of processes that I've created to integrate those two things. So anyone who's seeking next steps, that's a great place to go, is to the Sound of Transformation. Also, you can find me on Spotify. You can find me on iTunes. I have a YouTube channel. Reach out to me on Facebook and Instagram. And subscribe to my newsletter at barrygoldsteinmusic.com, because you get 3 free pieces of music when you do that. And that's a great way to just become part of my sound tribe. And that's really it. Yeah.
That's so beautiful. So many things going on. We'll put all the links to everything. And you've been kind enough to play some music for us as we exit. I have one last question for you before we do.
Yep.
What does God mean to you?
God, geez, that's a big mic to drop on the last question, man.
An easy one.
That could open up another hour of talk, man. So, God to me means connecting with something beyond myself, connecting with the everything and the creator of all things. So ultimately, it's connecting to creation and the creator. And when I'm in that space of creation, I know that I'm connecting to God. So God to me means all creations.
Beautiful. Barry, thank you so much for coming on. And would you like to play some music for us to end?
Yeah. So I'm going to just allow a piece of music to come through. If you feel inspired to, or you feel comfortable with placing your hands on your heart, and just gently slowing your breath down, breathing in through your heart and breathing out through your heart. Right? So on an in-breath, bringing in the essence of love, whatever that means to you. And on the exhale, releasing stress or anything that no longer serves you. And just allow yourself to synchronize to the music, to become lighter as the piece engages. I'm probably going to play for about 5 minutes. So if sometime during the piece you'd like to create an intention for yourself for the rest of your day, no matter when you're watching, you can do that. And if you need to send out a prayer to someone else during the process and you feel guided to do that, you can do that as well. So it's going to take me a couple of seconds to just switch over and to put myself into that space. And while I'm doing that, just gently place your hands on your heart and move into a state of awareness. As you touch your heart, you're bringing that awareness of your own unique vibration and your own inner orchestra, your heartbeat, your breath, moving in and moving out and connecting to your heart, coming back home to you, and just allow yourself to receive.
Go for it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.